there, fellow sojourners, and welcome back to another edition of Appropriating the Culture. On today's episode, we discuss the death of OJ Simpson and the state of our justice system. I'm Pastor Shane, I'll be Lady Justice today as we appropriate some culture. Yes, OJ Simpson, murderer, wife-beater, average golfer, struck down at the age of 76, or as the AP put it, legendary athlete, actor, and millionaire OJ Simpson's murder trial lost him the American dream. Yes, the trial did that. Oh, you can't commit double murders without a pesky trial? I'm sorry, I thought this was America. A chicken in every pot, two-car garage, and a double homicide with no questions. Now, I have no doubt that the trial must have been very difficult on him, especially because he was a recent widower. And the trial was a spectacle. It was the early days of cable news, 24 hours of continuous coverage, and the whole country was enraptured in closely following all the twists and turns of the trial. And because we were all following it, the whole country knew that O.J. Simpson was guilty because of, in technical terms, this thing called evidence. I don't know how to pronounce it. Basically, it just means that everything was pointing to him. He had a history of violence against his wife. It was his shoes, his gloves, his DNA, his victim's DNA. But as Joe Bluth said, the jury is still out on science. Especially if it's the OJ jury, who were not so much interested in science or evidence or facts or justice or rational thought. No, they were interested in payback. Here's one juror to explain.
Do you think that they're members of the jury that voted to acquit OJ because of Rodney King?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
How many of you think felt that way?
Oh, probably 90% of us.
90%? Did you feel that way?
Yes.
That was payback.
Uh-huh.
You think that's right?
It was payback for Rodney King. And if you don't remember or you're too young, Rodney King was a kind of sad fellow who had a long history with substance abuse. He was driving drunk and led the LAPD through a wild, high-speed chase, at the end of which he was apprehended and severely beaten by the LAPD, and it was all caught on camera. 4 officers were criminally charged, but ultimately they were acquitted because the argument was that King was attempting to flee and resisting arrest. And that verdict led to the LA riots. King himself was instrumental in stopping the riots. He gave a statement which has been reduced over the years to a simple plea, "Can't we all just get along?" And by that, he apparently meant, "Payback is a dish best served cold and not involving me at all." Payback is a bit of a non sequitur, actually. I mean, if it was about Rodney King, he gave you every opportunity to render a not guilty verdict that actually had something to do with him. In 1991, he was arrested for attempting to run over an undercover vice officer. In 1992, he was arrested for injuring his wife, Crystal. In 1993, he crashed his car into a block wall in downtown LA because he was, inebriated. In 1995, he was arrested for intentionally running into his wife, Crystal, with his car. I'm beginning to think he shouldn't have a driver's license. But it was about payback. The LA riots weren't payback. The criminal charges against Rodney King being dropped, that's not payback. The officers being fired from the LAPD, that's not payback. The officers being federally charged and convicted, that's not payback. Rodney King being paid $3.8 million by the city of LA, that's not payback. No, letting OJ get away with murder, that's payback. Take that, Justice. Now who's severely beaten? And that really does seem to be the position that people have. Yes, OJ was guilty, but the trial was about something else. Like this tweet from Mark Lamont Hill. OJ Simpson was an abusive liar who abandoned his community long before he killed 2 people in cold blood. His acquittal for murder was the correct and necessary result of a racist criminal legal system, but he's still a monster, not a martyr. Yes, his real crime was loving white people too much. Also the murders. Now, to be charitable to Mark Lamont Hill, he seems to be arguing that OJ was acquitted on a technicality, like it was thrown out because the evidence was inadmissible. But that's not true. Even if one were to take Hill's broader assertion seriously that the trial must be weighed and balanced to a racist criminal legal system, that still needs to rise to a level beyond reasonable doubt. Mark Lamont Hill doesn't have reasonable doubt. He flat out says he murdered 2 people. Not, I think he did, or he probably did. No, he flat out says he did it. Why? Because the evidence is overwhelming and beyond a reasonable doubt. If systemic racism in our legal system is such that it can't convict OJ, then who the heck can it convict? Does a black murderer have to actually write it out and say, I did it? Oh, wait. No, he said, if I did it. How cheeky. OJ maintained his innocence and spent the rest of his life searching for the real murderer, mostly on golf courses, which you have to admit seems a little limiting. I mean, the real killer could be into other sports like, I don't know, football. And I must say, as a Buffalo Bills fan, I take OJ's death as a positive omen for our chances to win the Super Bowl. A less good omen for our nation and justice and race relations is this clip.
But it was so racially charged because of what had happened just before with Rodney King, but also just how Black Americans feel about policing. It's not like OJ Simpson was the leader of the civil rights movement of his era. You know, he wasn't a social justice leader, but he represented something for the Black community in that moment, in that trial, particularly because there were 2 white people who had been killed, and the history around how Black people have been persecuted during slavery. There were just so many layers. And I guess I would just close with this, is that there was racial tension then, there is racial tension now. It might not be the backdrop of the Trump campaign, but until this country is ready to actually have an honest conversation about the racial dynamics from our origin story till today, we will always have moments like OJ Simpson that manifest, and our country will always be divided if we don't actually deal with the issue of race.
Wow. Yeah, we need to have an honest conversation about that. And what we need to say is that social justice is not justice. If race is in any way an element of consideration in our justice system, that needs to be eradicated. Justice needs to be impartial, not showing favoritism. This is a decree from God. Do not pervert justice. Do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly. And God is angered when we pervert justice. Woe to those who draw sin along with cords of deceit and wickedness as with cart ropes, to those who say, let God hurry, let him hasten his work so we may see it, the plan of the Holy One of Israel, let it approach, let it come into view so we may know it. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight. Woe to those who are heroes at drinking wine and champions at mixing drinks, who acquit the guilty for a bribe but deny justice to the innocent. I think that's a pretty good description of modern America. And in truth, I have less confidence in our judicial system now than when the OJ verdict came in. I think we are increasingly a culture that is less concerned with evidence or facts or merits of a case and more preoccupied and swayed by social narratives and Marxist oppressor-oppressed dynamics. And that's incredibly disheartening. So it's a good reminder that OJ Simpson is dead. Yes, he did outlive much of his legal team because apparently God hates lawyers more than murderers, but OJ Simpson is dead. He has come face to face with a good, impartial, and holy judge. And so will we. So will everybody. Everything will be held to account, and that's a comforting thought. One way or another, all the sins of the world will be accounted for, either by the atoning and sufficient work of Jesus on the cross or by your own punishment. But nobody is going to get away with anything. Justice will be done, and that is a comforting thought. All right, that'll do for today. As always, if you like what we're doing here, like, subscribe, tell a friend, buy my latest book, 6 Rounds for the Witching Hour, leave a 5-star review, follow me on the major socials, join my author's Facebook page, and I'll see you next time for more Appropriating the Culture.